Hey there, viewers. Quick question. What would push someone to the edge in a room full of lawyers and judges? Drop your thoughts in the comments because Diddy just snapped during a tense court session, losing control and even attempting to go after the judge. And trust me, what went down inside that courtroom will leave you stunned. Stay tuned. This one's wild. Let's get into it. Chapter 1. The day. Everything changed. Prison days? They all blend together after a while. Same walls, same faces, same routine. Nothing really changes until it does. And when it does, you feel it in the air before you even know what's coming. That's how it was the day Diddy went to court. At first, it felt like any other morning. The COs were making their rounds, barking orders like they always do. Breakfast trays clattered against the metal tables, and the yard was buzzing with the usual noise. Guys working out, running their mouths, settling old grudges. Just another day at MDC. But underneath all that, something was off. I could feel it as soon as I stepped out of my cell. The air was heavier, like everybody was holding their breath. The guards weren't talking as much. Usually they joke around or give us a hard time. But that day, they kept their eyes forward, hands closer to their belts. And the inmates? Even the loud ones, the ones who loved to stir things up, were quiet. Too quiet. At first, I couldn't figure out why. I mean, tension in here is nothing new. When you lock this many men together, trouble's always one wrong look away. But this was different. Then I heard it. Diddy's going to court today. Now you gotta understand, Diddy wasn't like anyone else in here. When he first came through those gates, he carried himself like nothing could touch him. He wasn't just a man, he was a presence, a living reminder that money and power could get you anything in the world, until it couldn't. But lately, things had started to shift. The attack he barely survived, the rumors swirling through these walls, the people who crossed him suddenly vanishing. Something about him felt dangerous. Even when he wasn't speaking, you could feel his power. Still, court days, those break a man. No matter how tough you think you are, stepping back into that courtroom, facing those judges, those lawyers, it reminds you just how little control you really have. And if a man like Diddy could lose control, well, that was enough to make everyone nervous. I caught my first glimpse of him when they brought him out of his cell. Even after everything, Diddy still looked like he was on top. Clean cut, fresh haircut, and that posture, back straight, head high. You'd think he was walking into a boardroom, not a courtroom. But there was something else in his eyes that day. Something I hadn't seen before. Anger. I don't mean the kind of anger that boils over easy. This was deeper, quieter, like a fire burning low, just waiting to explode. And from the way the guards moved around him, like they didn't want to get too close, I wasn't the only one who noticed. When the COs cuffed him up and started walking him down the hall, the whole block went silent. No jokes, no trash talk, just eyes watching every step he took. And when those doors closed behind him, that's when the whispers started. You think they'll break him today? No way. He's too powerful for that. I heard he's already losing it. I didn't say anything, but deep down, I had a feeling they were right. Because no matter how much power a man has, when the walls start closing in, something eventually gives. And today felt like the day Diddy might finally snap. The strange thing is, most guys, when they go to court, they come back different. Some return quieter. Some come back furious. Others, you can see the fear in their eyes. But with Diddy, it wasn't like that. Every time he came back, it was like he had something to prove. Like no judge, no lawyer, no prison could touch him. And maybe for a while, That was true. But that day? I had a feeling his luck was running out. I heard from one of the guys who worked in the law library that the prosecutors weren't playing games anymore. They weren't just after a conviction. They wanted to tear down everything Diddy had built, every deal, every secret, every person he thought he had control over. And if there's one thing I know, a man like Diddy, he wasn't built to be controlled. By mid-morning, the energy in the block shifted again. A couple of COs from the court transport team came back through, their faces pale. And when I tried to catch their conversation, I only caught a few words, but they told me everything I needed to know. Lost it. Never seen anything like it. Judge almost called a mistrial. Completely out of control. I wanted to know more, but nobody was talking. The guards kept their heads down, and the inmates, even the toughest guys in here, didn't want to speculate. But I knew one thing for sure. Whatever happened in that courtroom wasn't normal. And Diddy? He wasn't coming back the same. Hours passed before they brought him back. When the doors buzzed open and he stepped through, the whole block froze. I don't think I've ever heard this place so quiet, not even during lockdown. He didn't say a word as he walked back to his cell. Didn't make eye contact with anyone. But the tension around him, it was heavier than ever. And when he passed by my cell, I swear I saw his hands still shaking. Not from fear, from rage. And in that moment, I knew. Whatever happened in that courtroom, it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Because a man like Diddy, he doesn't forget. And when the system tries to break someone like that, eventually something breaks back. Chapter 2. The Courtroom Showdown. When they took Diddy out of the block that morning, I figured I'd seen the last of him for the day. Maybe longer. Court days, especially for a guy like him, can stretch for hours. Sometimes they ship you straight to another holding facility if things go sideways. But even after the doors closed behind him, the weight he left behind in the block didn't fade. If anything, it got heavier. And I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I've seen plenty of high-profile guys come through MDC. Politicians, celebrities, big-time criminals. The system loves to chew them up and spit them out. Most of them come in thinking their power on the outside means something in here. But once that cell door slams shut, all the money, connections, and influence, it doesn't mean a damn thing. But Diddy, he was different. Even in cuffs, even when the COs had their hands on him, it was like he wasn't really here. Like all of this, prison, the charges, the court appearances, was just a temporary inconvenience. Something he could shake off whenever he wanted. But anyone with half a brain knew the truth. That illusion was starting to crack. When they loaded him into the transport van, things started feeling strange. Normally, the trip to the courthouse is just another ride. Bumpy, uncomfortable, nothing special. But that day, it was quiet. Too quiet. The usual small talk from the guards was gone. No joking, no snide remarks. They just kept their eyes on Diddy like they were waiting for something to happen. And the man himself? He sat there, hands cuffed in front of him, face blank like he was already 3 steps ahead of everyone in the room. But there was something else in his eyes. Something colder. It wasn't fear. It wasn't anger. It was calculation. Like he was already working out his next move. The courthouse was a different world compared to MDC. Bright lights, clean floors, everything designed to remind you that the system is in charge. But the minute Diddy walked in, it felt like the whole place shifted. I heard from one of the guys on the transport team that even the marshals seemed on edge. These are men who've dealt with the worst of the worst. Cartel bosses, violent gang leaders, terrorists. But that day, the way they watched Diddy, it was like they knew something the rest of us didn't. When they brought him through the side entrance, the usual routine was out the window. No processing delay, no paperwork screw-ups. It was like everyone wanted to get him in and out as quickly as possible. And if there's one thing I've learned about the justice system, when they're moving that fast, it's not a good sign. The courtroom itself was packed. Prosecutors, defense lawyers, reporters. It felt less like a legal proceeding and more like a spectacle. People wanted to see the fall of a man who once seemed untouchable. But when Diddy walked in, he didn't give them the satisfaction of looking broken. If anything, he looked bigger than the room. Shoulders back, head high. That same arrogance he carried everywhere. But to me, it felt different. It wasn't confidence. Not really. It was hollow. Like he knew all this. Everything happening around him was just temporary. Like none of it mattered. The judge wasn't playing around that day. From the moment she took the bench, her tone was sharp, her words cutting. She wasn't here to entertain the spectacle or to bend under the weight of his name. And Diddy? For a while, he acted like it didn't faze him. He leaned back in his chair, expression blank, like he wasn't listening. But I could see it, his hands twitching under the table, his jaw tightening every time the prosecution mentioned something that cut too close to the truth. The prosecutors knew what they were doing. They painted a picture of a man who thought the rules didn't apply to him. The deals, the money trails, the people who vanished after crossing him. It was all laid out in excruciating detail. And through it all, Diddy sat there, unmoving, like it was all beneath him. But even from where I was sitting, I could tell it was starting to wear on him. The turning point came when they brought up the attack. I wasn't there when it happened, but the whispers spread fast in 1604. Everyone knew Diddy got jumped by a group that no one dared to mess with. And the fact that he survived, that only added to the legend. But the prosecutors weren't interested in the legend. They were focused on something else. Control. They painted a picture of a man who wasn't the master of his empire anymore, a man who was losing his grip. And when they hinted that the people behind that attack had disappeared under mysterious circumstances, I caught it, just for a second. A flicker of something in Diddy's eyes. Rage. And when they said he might have ordered something from inside the prison, that's when I knew the cracks were starting to show. The judge wasn't blind to it either. Her tone got colder the longer the hearing went on. And when she started questioning Diddy's defense team, it was like she wasn't just challenging the arguments, she was challenging him. And I swear, for a second, I saw it. Diddy's mask slipping. That calm, untouchable image, it wasn't holding anymore. He was angry. But more than that, he was losing control. By the time the hearing hit the afternoon, the whole courtroom felt like it was about to explode. The tension was so thick you could choke on it. Even the marshals seemed nervous, like they were waiting for something to go sideways. And when the judge started hinting at new evidence that could make things worse for Diddy, you could feel the shift. Because for the first time, Diddy didn't look like he had all the answers. When the judge finally called for a break, nobody moved right away. It was like everyone was afraid to be the first one to breathe. And Diddy? He just sat there, frozen, like he was deciding whether to keep playing the game or flip the whole board over. And in that moment, one thing became crystal clear to me. This wasn't just another court hearing. This was a battle for control. And if there's one thing a man like Diddy couldn't afford to lose, it was that. Chapter 3. The Reckoning Begins. When they brought Diddy back into the courtroom after the break, the energy shifted. You could feel it. Heavy, tense, like something was about to snap. The reporters whispered to each other, cameras flashing as he took his seat. But Diddy, He barely acknowledged any of it. His expression was cold, blank, like the entire scene in front of him was just a minor inconvenience. I'd seen that look before. It wasn't the face of a man worried about his future. It was the face of a man who believed he already knew the outcome. Like no matter what happened in that room, he was still the one pulling the strings. And that's what made it dangerous. Because when a man like Diddy stops caring, when he thinks nothing can touch him, that's when things go sideways. The prosecution wasted no time getting to business. When the judge returned to the bench, her tone was colder, sharper, like she'd already made up her mind about the kind of man sitting in front of her. This wasn't a trial. This was a dismantling. And the first witness? A woman. She walked in, head held high. But you could tell, beneath the surface, there was fear. The kind of fear that only comes from knowing what a man like Diddy is capable of. The courtroom fell dead silent as she took the stand. Even the reporters stopped scribbling. Everyone wanted to hear what she had to say. And Diddy? He didn't flinch, didn't blink. He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled, like he was watching a show he'd already seen 100 times. Like none of this could touch him. Her voice trembled at first. She talked about the promises, how he pulled people into his orbit with money, power, and the illusion that they were untouchable. But once you were in, there was no easy way out. Her testimony wasn't just about the business deals or the contracts. It was about the fear, the manipulation, the things no one outside his world ever saw. But the whole time she spoke, Diddy didn't react. Not once. Most men, when their past comes back to haunt them, crack under the pressure. You see it in their eyes, the way their shoulders tense. But not Diddy. It was like none of it mattered. Like she didn't matter. And somehow, that was worse. The judge listened carefully, asking sharp questions when things got murky. But every time she glanced at Diddy, you could see it. The growing frustration. Because nothing seemed to shake him. When the woman finished her testimony and stepped down, there was a moment, a pause, where the whole room seemed to hold its breath. But Diddy, he just shifted in his seat like he was bored, like he was waiting for the next act in a play he already knew by heart. And one by one, they came. Another man, a former business associate, was next. He spoke in a calm, measured voice, but the details were damning. Shady financial deals, silent payoffs. How anyone who became a threat just disappeared from the picture. The prosecution laid it all bare. And through it all, Diddy never lost that air of arrogance. It was like he believed none of these people were on his level. Like their words couldn't touch him, because in his mind, they were nothing compared to his power. And maybe that's what scared me the most. Because the man sitting in that courtroom, he wasn't desperate. He wasn't broken. He was in control. By the time the third witness took the stand, you could feel the pressure in the room shifting. This guy, an ex-bodyguard, had the kind of presence you couldn't ignore. Thick-necked, heavy-built, a guy who looked like he'd seen things no one should. When he spoke, the room felt colder. He talked about the nights that never made the headlines, the secret meetings, the violence behind closed doors. And when he described what happened to people who crossed Diddy, the silence was deafening. But still, Diddy didn't flinch. The words, the accusations, the details, they might as well have been whispers on the wind. And maybe that's what separated him from everyone else. Most men in his position, they crumble when the truth comes out. But Diddy, he seemed almost amused. Like all of this whole performance, was beneath him. The judge called for a recess after the bodyguard finished his testimony. And when Diddy stood to leave, you could feel it, the weight he carried. even in shackles. People talk about power like it's something you can lose overnight. But in that moment, watching him walk out of that courtroom, I realized something. Diddy didn't believe he could lose. And maybe, just maybe, he was right. When the recess ended, the courtroom felt different, tighter, the air heavier. Because the next witness? He wasn't just another former associate. He was someone who knew where the bodies were buried. And for the first time, I saw Diddy react. It was subtle. Most people wouldn't notice it. But I've spent enough time around men like him to catch the smallest cracks. When that man walked in, when he locked eyes with Diddy, there was a flicker, a shift in posture, a flash of something behind his calm facade. And I knew right then, whatever was coming next, it wasn't part of his plan. The prosecution wasted no time getting to the heart of it. This witness, an insider from Diddy's inner circle, wasn't here to tell a story. He was here to expose one. He talked about the cover-ups, the secret deals, the things no one on the outside could ever imagine. And as he spoke, I saw it, clear as day. Diddy's calm was slipping. His fingers drummed against the table, slow, controlled, but restless. His jaw clenched tighter with each passing word. And when the witness mentioned something about an incident that had never gone public, that's when I knew, for the first time since this whole circus began, Diddy felt cornered. The rest of the courtroom might not have noticed it, but I did. And if there's one thing I know about a man like Diddy, when he feels cornered, he strikes back. And judging by the look in his eyes, that moment was coming sooner than anyone expected. Chapter 4. The Boy Who Knew Too Much. By the time the court resumed after lunch, it was clear that nothing in that room was affecting Diddy. Not the testimonies, not the accusations, not even the judge's cold glare. He sat there, leaned back in his chair, wearing that same look he always did. The one that said, "This is just a formality." I'd seen a lot of powerful men come through the system, guys who thought their money or their name made them invincible. But Diddy, he was on another level. It was like he didn't even recognize the possibility of losing. Every word thrown against him, every witness, every damning detail, none of it touched him. If anything, he looked bored. Like the whole thing was a waste of his time. But then, he walked in. A kid. Couldn't have been more than 18, maybe 19 years old. Skinny too, like he hadn't eaten properly in weeks. He shuffled in slow, his hands twitching at his sides, eyes darting around the room like he was expecting something or someone to stop him. And that's when I saw it. Diddy froze. Just for a split second. But it was there. That calm, arrogant mask slipped, and underneath, fear. Real, raw fear. I've seen men stare down life sentences without breaking a sweat. But whatever was going through Diddy's mind in that moment, it was different. He didn't lean back in his chair anymore. He didn't smirk. His whole body tensed, eyes locked on the boy like he was seeing a ghost. And when the kid finally took his seat, I swear, Diddy looked pale, like someone had just dragged a secret out of a place he thought no one would ever reach. The prosecutor's voice cut through the tension. "State your name for the record." The kid hesitated. His mouth opened, then closed. For a moment, I thought he might back out. But then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he spoke. "Jamal." Just that. No last name. Nothing else. And whatever that name meant to Diddy, it hit him hard. His hands, which had been resting so calmly on the table, curled into fists. His breathing changed, shallow, uneven. The judge noticed it too. Her gaze flicked between Diddy and the boy, eyes narrowing like she sensed something wasn't right. But no one else in the courtroom seemed to understand what was happening. Not yet. The prosecutor kept going, voice steady and sharp. "You understand why you're here today, correct?" The kid nodded, but he didn't say anything. His whole body was stiff, like he was holding something inside. Something heavy. Diddy shifted in his seat. I'd never seen him like that before. On edge. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just another witness. This kid was holding something Diddy didn't want the world to know. When the prosecutor asked Jamal to describe his connection to Diddy, the whole courtroom leaned in closer. Even the reporters, who had been half bored up until now, sensed that something big was about to drop. And then, "I worked for him," Jamal said. His voice cracked a little, but he kept going. "I was part of his team. Kind of." His words were vague, too vague, but it was clear there was more to the story. And for the first time since this trial started, Diddy wasn't in control. The prosecutor pressed on. "What exactly did you do for Mr. Combs?" The boy hesitated again. His eyes flicked toward Diddy, just for a second, but that second said everything. Fear. Deep, gut-wrenching fear. But eventually, he answered. "I handled things." His voice dropped lower. Stuff he didn't want anyone else to know about. And just like that, the air in the courtroom changed. Because everyone knew, when men at Diddy's level say stuff, it ain't paperwork. Diddy's whole posture shifted. His foot tapped against the floor, a small, rapid movement. His jaw clenched so tight you could see the muscles twitching. And when he turned his head, just slightly, toward Jamal, I swear the temperature in that room dropped. Because that wasn't just a glance. That was a warning. But Jamal kept talking. He told the court how he got pulled into Diddy's orbit when he was only 16. Too young to understand what he was really getting into, but old enough to know that once you were in, there was no way out. At first, it was simple errands, delivering packages, keeping quiet. But over time, it got darker, more personal. And the deeper he went, the more dangerous things became. The whole time he spoke, Diddy didn't say a word. But I could feel the heat coming off him. I've seen killers less angry than he looked in that moment. And then Jamal said something that made the whole room go still. He told me, the kid swallowed hard. He told me that if I ever spoke about what I saw, that no one would ever find me. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the guards looked uncomfortable. And Diddy? He wasn't calm anymore. His fingers tapped faster. His foot wouldn't stop moving. And that cold, arrogant mask he'd worn all day, it was slipping fast. Because whatever this kid knew, it wasn't supposed to come out. The judge noticed too. She leaned forward, eyes locked on Jamal. "And what exactly did you see?" she asked, voice cold and sharp. The boy hesitated, one last time. And when he finally answered, Diddy lost it. "I saw people disappear," Jamal said. His voice trembled. "People who crossed him, they just vanished. And I know what happened to them." Before the prosecutor could ask another question, Diddy stood up so fast his chair scraped against the floor. His face, usually a mask of calm, was twisted with rage. "You better watch yourself," he growled, voice low but dangerous. The guards snapped to attention, moving toward him, but for a second, it didn't seem like they'd get there in time, because Diddy wasn't just angry, he was ready to strike. And as the guards pulled him back, one thing became crystal clear to everyone in that room. Whatever that kid knew, whatever truth he was holding, it was something Diddy had fought to bury. And now, it was finally coming to light. Chapter 5. When the mask finally slipped. By the time the judge called the court back to order, you could feel the tension crawling through the air. Whatever was about to happen, it wasn't going to be normal. I'd been in prison long enough to know when something was off. And that day, everything was off. Diddy, who had spent the entire trial sitting there like he was untouchable, was still visibly rattled from that kid's testimony. No more smirking, no more calm confidence. Just pure, raw anger bubbling beneath the surface. The judge cleared her throat and fixed her cold, unyielding gaze on the kid. "Jamal," she said, her voice echoing through the silent courtroom. "You're under oath. I'm giving you one last chance. Tell this court the full truth." But Jamal didn't speak, didn't even move. He just sat there, frozen, his hands trembling slightly on the witness stand. And from where I was sitting, I could see the fear in his eyes. This wasn't the usual kind of fear, the kind inmates carry when they face a heavy sentence. This was deeper, like he knew something the rest of us didn't, something too dangerous to speak aloud. The prosecutor, sensing that something wasn't right, stood up slowly. "Your Honor," he said, "with your permission, the state would like to present new evidence." The judge nodded. But did he? He didn't. His whole body tensed the second the words "new evidence" were spoken. It was subtle, but to someone like me who spent years watching powerful men crack under pressure, it was obvious. Whatever they were about to show, Diddy didn't want it out. A large flat-screen monitor flickered to life facing the courtroom. The lights dimmed and the room fell into a heavy silence. And then, it played. The video. At first, the footage was grainy, like it had been pulled from a security camera. But even through the static, there was no mistaking who was on the screen. Diddy. And next to him, Jamal. The video showed them in a private room, somewhere far from the public eye. Diddy was leaning in close, talking low, but his body language was impossible to miss. This wasn't a friendly conversation. This was power. Pure, unchecked power, pressed against someone who had none. And Jamal, he looked terrified. His shoulders hunched, eyes wide. Like he already knew whatever was coming next wasn't gonna end well. The courtroom was dead silent. Even the reporters, who usually couldn't keep quiet if their lives depended on it, weren't typing. Everyone was locked on that screen. Everyone, except Diddy. His jaw was clenched tight, fingers tapping against the table again, faster this time. And for the first time since he walked into that courtroom, he looked like a man losing control. And then, the video changed. It cut to something darker, something uglier. A moment where Diddy wasn't just using words. He was making threats. Clear, cold, ruthless. "If you open your mouth," Diddy's voice echoed from the speakers, "you'll disappear like the rest of them." I felt the chill run through the room. Because those words, they weren't just for Jamal. They were a message. To everyone. The judge's face hardened. "Pause the video," she ordered. But before the technician could follow through, the screen went black. Just like that. No warning, no error message, just off. The prosecutor spun around, confused. "What happened?" The technician shook his head, frowning. I don't know. The file just stopped." Diddy, though, he didn't look confused. He looked relieved, like he knew, somehow, some way, that the video was never going to finish. The judge wasn't having it. "Get it working again," she snapped. But while the tech scrambled to restart the footage, I kept my eyes on Diddy. And that's when I realized something. This wasn't a glitch. This was planned. Someone, somewhere, was pulling strings to protect him. And Diddy? He knew it. His shoulders eased. His breathing slowed. And that fear that had been twisting across his face? Gone. In its place? Arrogance. Like he'd just been reminded that no matter what anyone did, no matter how much evidence they had, he was still in charge. And he didn't think anyone could touch him. But the judge? She wasn't backing down. "If that video is what you say it is," she said, "then Mr. Combs will answer for it." Her tone was sharp, too sharp. And the moment those words left her mouth, Diddy snapped. He stood up so fast his chair slammed against the floor. "You think you can judge me?" His voice cut through the courtroom, sharp and angry. "You don't know who I am." The guards tensed, but they weren't fast enough. Diddy lunged, straight at the judge. The courtroom exploded into chaos. People screamed. Reporters dove for cover. And the guards? They scrambled to contain him. But for a second, I thought they wouldn't. Because Diddy wasn't just angry. He was out for blood. I'd seen guys lose it before. But this was different. He wasn't acting out of panic. This was rage. Pure, calculated rage, directed at the one person who dared to threaten his power. When the guards finally tackled him to the ground, he was still shouting. "You think this is over?" His voice echoed through the chaos. "I own this place. You hear me? I own it." And even as they cuffed him and dragged him out of the courtroom, his words hung heavy in the air. Because the truth, for a long time, he did own it. But not anymore. The judge's face was pale as she banged her gavel, calling for order. But there was no going back now. The mask had slipped. And for the first time, the world saw Diddy for what he really was. Not just a man with power, a man desperate to keep it. And judging by what I'd just witnessed, he was willing to do anything to hold on.